Hello.
Hello, Frederick. Hello, it's Sarah. How are you doing?
Hello, hello. Fine,
Good
thank you.
Thank you, it's Sarah, for joining us today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for inviting.
Pleasure. How are you doing, guys?
All good.
Nice. We have more than 50 registrations, so that's a really.
Do you know, George, if they have a legal background or they are just health researchers? Do you know about their profile?
I can send you, if you want, I can send you the collected presentation. But if you can also take a look at the agenda on the promotional page.
But I think in terms of participants, it's a mix of people with more academic background, people with some industry background involved in companies or projects and so on. So it varies across the list of registrants.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Let me share the presentation so the people know. See that.
I have made some late-minute changes. It was too long, as always.
No problem at all.
So I think I could manage to share myself, I think.
That's also fine. Freddy, just a quick check. Can you see the presentation, the cover slide?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Only the slide, or you can see also the.
Well, we see the frame, the Acrobat or PDF frame is still visible.
It's not so dramatic because at the end, because we're recording the video, we're gonna cut just the. We're gonna cut out the frame.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
Am I allowed to have a trial also for sharing?
No problem. You can do it. You can do it. We have enough time. I mean, we're gonna start like 5 to 7 minutes after the official beginning, so we have plenty of time for test. Would you like me to stop sharing?
I don't know if it's necessary. I think I can. Yeah,
I think
I'm
if you
allowed
start
to share.
sharing, it will change. Yeah.
Okay, automatically. So let's see.
Yep.
Hello, Matilde. How are you?
Hello.
Fine, thank you. And you?
Doing great, thank you.
Okay, yeah, we see the screen, but we see the notes. Yeah, now we still see the presenter view.
Okay.
Yeah, we still see the notes.
Okay, so I'll skip screens. Let's see.
This now we only see the full slide.
Okay, this way. I see.
Yeah, well, in this mode we see the notes as well.
Do you see the notes?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I have. I don't know why. Okay. I'll skip screens and try again.
Yeah, okay.
Excuse me. This way, are you still seeing my presenter view?
Yeah, it's still the presenter view. Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, like this, we only see the slide, but then maybe you don't see your notes.
Now we can see the notes.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know exactly how it might work if you open, yeah, maybe two windows in the background, one with the just a regular, yeah, slideshow, and then another one with the presenter view. I'm not sure if that's even possible or work, and then that you would only share the screen with only the slides.
I mean, if it's more comfortable for you, you can send me the updated version of your presentation and I can share it. It's visible.
Hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear you now. Okay. Okay, let's see.
Excuse me, I'm not sure if I need also to check my slides. Should I share it myself or you will do that?
Whatever you want. I can share it also from our side. I have built in your presentation in the event presentation, so I can share it also from.
Yeah, okay.
Would you like me to do it?
I think both are fine with me. If I can also just try to see if I can share it myself, or maybe if you share it, that's better because then I can see more in the screen.
Okay.
Okay. And also just one question in terms of the timing. I think mine is at 2. Is it correct? Because I'm also I cannot stay longer than 2:30, so just want to make sure. Sorry,
Your presentation starts at exactly 10 minutes after 2, so 14.10.
okay.
Hello, Catherine. I saw that you joined us. We will start around 5 minutes after 2 o'clock. So we can.
Hello, everyone. Let
Hello.
me see how I will probably. Oh, okay. Good background. I'll keep it.
That's a really nice background. A
As a
typical,
positive step.
typical Mediterranean background.
Yeah, yeah. Nothing like what I experience at the moment. It's
Yeah.
quite raining outside. So we are starting 5 after?
Yes, approximately. Yes.
So we have 15 minutes, right? For each presentation.
Yes, of course. But if you need 5 more minutes additionally, it's not a problem.
Yeah, all right. I have a couple of examples I pulled from different projects that might be interesting and give interesting paradigms as well.
Thank you.
I think I'll move to another spot. Minutes.
All right, we can start today's webinar. So hello and welcome to another episode from the Platform Uptake webinar series. My name is Alexander Nikolov, and I'm working for Senyu GmbH based in Vienna, and we are coordinating the PlatformUptake.eu project. The idea of these virtual events is on one side to share relevant insights we gathered within the project, but beyond that, we would like to get in touch with some further stakeholders from the ecosystem of open platforms in the active and healthy aging and assisted living domains, get additional information on existing capability gaps, innovation needs in the field, and feed this information back into the project. This particular webinar has the goal to provide more insights on the topic of data sharing and data regulation in the field of open platforms and digital technology for active and healthy aging. Our dear presenters will kindly provide information on the benefits of sharing data in the field for involved stakeholders, including providers of open platforms, care and healthcare organizations, primary end users such as older persons and patients, as well as policymakers. Our guests will also highlight some of the challenges related to the data regulation which are faced by the above-mentioned actors, and based on their experience, professional background, and country, will share some best practices to implement effectively data sharing within the current regulatory frameworks. The webinar will begin with a short introduction to Platform Uptake project and continue with a presentation by our dear co-organizer of the event, Ms. Matilde Debonis from the IDIH project. After these two short parts, we'll move on with the first presentation carried out by Ms. Mahanza Shabani from the Ghent University in Belgium. Ms. Shabani is assistant professor in privacy law. The second interesting contribution to today's event will be done by Konstantinos Bromis from the Institute of Communication and Computer Science in Greece, who will be sharing some insights based on his experience with SmartBed project. The webinar will continue with presentation of Ms. Catherine Hornaki, who is Secretary General of HL7 Europe Foundation Greece. Next, Ms. Maria Palombini, who is Director of Emerging Communities and Opportunities Development at IEEE Standard Association with a headquarters in New Jersey, United States, will share her point of view regarding data sharing and data regulation in the field of open platforms and digital technology. Last but not least, Professor Itha Alcota from the University of Basque Country, Spain, will present her experience on the topic, such as, among others, the implementation of GDPR, the choice of legal basis for conducting research in the field, and cooperation is a crucial factor for better research on data sharing. Please feel free to ask us questions anytime in the chat option in the right below corner, or interrupt us during the presentations. We'll be more than happy to answer them either during the event or after its completion. So now, a couple of words on our great project, PlatformUptake.eu. As you know, aging presents one of the main socioeconomic challenges of our century. European Union has devoted already a vast amount of resources for the development of ICT solutions, including also open platforms for the development of innovative solutions in the art domain. Unfortunately, some of these developed platforms have either remained unknown to the wider public or have stopped even existing. Again, this background, our project seeks to understand the whole ecosystem of open platforms in the field and contribute to the development of an open market for digital solutions for active and healthy aging, and of course, ultimately promote the uptake of these existing platforms. The PlatformUptake.eu project is a coordination and support action funded from the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. So what we have achieved so far, I have posted here the main outcomes within the current phase of project implementation. We have many more to report. This, of course, will be included in our public reports to be submitted by the end of the project. So the main points, we have created an open information hub, which features information on existing open platforms in digital solutions for active and healthy aging. The hub represents also the main reference point for all project stakeholders when it comes to knowledge collection and knowledge exchange on pressing issues and challenges in the field. Based on the defined KPIs for the monitoring and assessment of interoperability, synergies, and cost-benefit analysis of open platforms in the AHA domain, we have created tools that allow for both platform providers and developers of technology for the people to evaluate and compare the current state of the art and establish ultimately cooperation with their counterparts. Further, our project designed and developed a massive online open course that is aimed towards healthcare and care providers as well as policymakers and seeks to help them build understanding of the use of all platforms and their benefits and support them in the choice of a platform that can be integrated into their organizations. To bring the importance of open platforms, but also highlight the benefits for the developers of technologies in the field, our project conducts ongoing interviews and matchmaking activities with experts in the AHA domain, as well as knowledge collection procedures to allow for interested organizations to benefit from knowledge exchange and exploit future collaborations. Part of our activities, of course, focus on the identification of the gaps and challenges for the uptake of open platforms in the field, departing from the established set of KPIs that I shortly mentioned. Our project find out that there's some hurdles for the uptake of the platforms under consideration, which relate, for example, to the difficulty of defining a successful business model, or partially or not sufficiently address communication strategy towards future and potential end users. Another challenge, which in our case represents also the topic of today's webinar, are the various regulations and standards for data regulation and data exchange, to which open platforms and digital technology as a whole needs to adhere to. That being said, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Matilde de Bonis from the IDIH project, which will kindly share some insight on this great initiative. Matilde, the floor is yours. Would you like me to share the presentation from my side?
I
let you take me all the care.
Share by myself. Thank you, Alexander. Do you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Great. So, hello to everyone. I'm Matilde de Bonis from APRE, the Agency for the Promotion of European Research in Italy. And with APRE, we are partner in the IDIH project. And today we are very grateful to Alexander and the team from PlatformUptake to having organized also with us this very interesting webinar also for our project. Here you see a short fact sheet about what is IDIH project, the International Digital Health Cooperation for Preventive Integrated Independent and Inclusive Living. Actually, we are trying to enhance international cooperation between Europe and 5 strategic partner countries in the field of digital health and active and healthy aging. And these are China, Canada, Japan, South Korea, and USA. So we are 9 partners. So this is a project that is going to be ended soon by April 2022. Here you see how we are managing these challenge of international cooperation. So this is really an IDIH project at global level. We would like really to serve as a catalyst for the international dialogue in digital health for active and healthy aging. And how we do this? Through an evidence-based approach, through an expert-driven approach also, because we have gathered almost 30 experts throughout the world, across countries, and they are now working within our Digital Health Transformation Forum to provide policymakers and the relevant funding agencies in our fields, digital health and aging in these countries, to provide them with some recommendations and concrete steps to undertake and favor, enhance international cooperation around these domains. So we would like to define common priorities. We would like to favor international dialogue as a community of experts internationally, but also, and most important, at policy level, creating a policy level cooperation, program level cooperation. And then we are also working to facilitate the exchanges among RTI communities at international level. So here you see how we created this Digital Health Transformation Forum as an expert-driven forum and mechanism to provide policymakers with evidence. And then we worked actually with 4 expert groups, starting from 4 focus topics that are for digital health and aging: preventive care, integrated care, independent and connected living, and inclusive living. And actually, we are trying to finalize our outcomes from these forums. So we are presenting these common priorities to enhance international cooperation, as well as concrete steps and recommendations for policymaking in a roadmap towards enhanced international collaboration on digital solutions for active and healthy aging. So here you see some products and services that we are carrying out. We have already released and published these fact sheets on the trends, the panorama of R&I around digital health and active and healthy aging, also the results of our SWOT analysis in each of these strategic countries, including Europe. And then we have elaborated 2 guidebooks gathering all information about funding opportunities for international cooperation in digital health and active and healthy aging. We are now managing an help desk to support any applicants who wants to really get funding for international cooperation in this field. And we have set a long-term matchmaking platform currently gathered more than 300 people, stakeholders in these fields. And now, following our first edition in 2021, we are actually managing these huge event for us that is upcoming between March 21 and March 24. That is the IDIH week 2022. And here you find the link where to register. It's really a week of events, full of events. We will start with an info day about our fundings, products, also with some sessions dedicated to information about funding opportunities for international cooperation in this field. And then we will have, as a key novelty for this edition, 2 regional workshops, one dedicated to US and the panorama of digital health and active and healthy aging, from the point of view of the tech providers, from associations of users, but also researchers with a focus on the impact of COVID-19 on independent and inclusive living. And then we will have another regional workshop on Japan with the collaboration and the partnership of the Ministry of Japan of Internal Affairs and Communication in charge of Horizon in Japan. And then I would like to close with 2 partnering days that will allow all participants to have a pitch about their business, their idea for projects, current projects also on digital health and active and healthy aging. And then the Innovation Day, this will be really a very nice opportunity to focus on the specific outcomes of our forum, mainly around data governance, digital inclusion, and interoperability by design. So in the overall domain of digital health and aging. And we will follow these 2 panel discussions in collaboration with the EVITA project, so this project of cooperation between Europe and Japan. And then the International Society of Gerontechnology, we will follow this 2 panel discussion with some co-creation sessions. So we really kindly encourage you to register if you did not yet. To this idea week. And just to close up, we have also some podcasts and a magazine where you will find some other key updates about the domains we are dealing with. So thank you for the attention. These are our contacts. And thank you, Alexander and the team and Friedrich for this webinar today.
Thank you, Mathieu. Thank you very much for the informative presentation. We can only recommend our participants to join your B2Match platform. There are more than 370, I think, participants, and we have already established many collaborations. So it's just to recommend you. I also posted the link in the chat option. Thank you. I'm going to share the presentation of the next guest. All right. Shabai, please feel free to take over and present.
Yeah, thank you very much also for having me. My name is Mahsa Shabani. I'm an assistant professor in health privacy at Ghent University in Belgium. And I will just provide a very high level and short overview also of recent developments related to data sharing in health and also some of the upcoming, let's say, regulatory frameworks that will be published soon. So next slide, please. Yeah, this is already the title, so the next one, please. Thank you very much. So as you probably know very well, in the recent years has been very increasing attentions to the topic of data sharing in health for indeed both clinical but also research purposes. And we have seen also the impact of this increasing attention in the investments that's been done so far in developing different platforms for data sharing across Europe and also internationally. So the idea here is that, and has been also the focus of my research in the previous years, that researchers should be able to share their health data, the health data that they are generating through different studies. Through these platforms. Some of them are, of course, disease specific, some of them are much broader, epidemiological studies and so on. And the idea is that, of course, ideally this should be as accessible, it should be widely accessible to researchers across the world, or indeed in line with the spirit of the FAIR principles, as I'm sure that most of you are aware of it. So in view of these advancements, of course, we know very well that processing and sharing sensitive health data requires also a regulatory framework, which has been it's been indeed regulated also through what we call horizontal regulation, regulations like the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which are not sector specific, so they apply, of course, for various types of personal data. But as I will show also in the last slide, we are also moving in a direction that very soon we will have a sector-specific regulation also for data sharing in health, and which will hopefully facilitate and also regulate this aspect. So I noticed that there will be another presentation as well on the GDPR and data sharing, so I will not go too much into the details of this, let's say, regulatory framework. I will just very short mention that, of course, since the implementation of the GDPR in 2018, we have indeed some clarities regarding some aspects when it comes to processing health data. So it's a clear definition for health data for what is considered as a personal data. Also definition, for example, for pseudonymization and pseudonymized data, which has been explicitly mentioned, that's also considered as personal data. So I think that in that sense, the GDPR has done some, let's say, good job in providing some clarity related to regulation of processing personal data and including health data. However, as probably you will hear also in the other presentation, in some aspects, especially those related to the legal basis for processing data, and especially those that are specific for research purposes, still there are some, let's say, complexities or a lack of clarifications, which I will also mention it in the next slide. And also some of the concepts that are being mentioned in articles of the GDPR, like Article 89 regarding the safeguards which have been also considered to be very important in terms of adopting different technical, but also, let's say, organizational safeguards, which are necessary to protect the rights of the data subjects. So I think that it's also important to be cognizant and to be aware of the existing barriers in front of the data sharing in health. And I think that regulatory landscape is indeed is the reason for part of these, let's say, barriers or difficulties in sharing health data. I will try to just go very quickly through some of these major barriers, which have been also very recently included in a document that's been published by the European Commission in preparation for the upcoming European health data space. So this is indeed some of the elements that's been also included in the roadmap for this legislative proposal, which I will explain in the last slide. So I think that you probably know, if you are dealing with health data, that there are still insufficient health data exchange, which is of course negatively impacting the provision of healthcare services as well. So it's not only in the secondary use or data sharing aspect, but also for the primary access to the data and use of health data. Still, it's not very ideal. But also we have seen in the literature that's been published, and also different investigations that's been done, that there are also some shortcomings in terms of how far individuals, patients, research participants can also have easy access to their own data, how they can share their data, for example, and how far indeed the control that individuals can exercise on health data. Also, this is not very optimal at this moment. We have also, of course, fragmentation on digital standards, which is, of course, it's key for the digital interoperability between healthcare systems. I think probably this is going beyond the regulatory complexities, but still it's very important. And finally, the element that I just mentioned also in the previous slide, that so we know now very well that the GDPR and data protection regulation still left some space and some room for different member states in terms of implementation of some of the articles under the GDPR, including those related to secondary use and processing data for research purposes, which is also reflected in the Article 18.9 of the GDPR and Article 9.2J. So these are the elements that it causes also some legal complexities as well, and it just makes it also difficult for especially let's say European projects that they aim to share data between different member states. When you have partners from different member states, of course the ideal situation is that they all be able to follow the same rules when it comes to, for example, consent, what is the specific legal basis for initial data collection, and also for the purpose of data sharing, and what is, as it's called, as secondary use of data or further processing of data. So these are the elements that we know, I think, and the studies that's been published so far, both in the academic literature and also policy reports that's been published also by the data protection authorities in the EU, have indeed highlighted this element as the existing barriers. So the next slide, please. Yeah. So now I think that we are quite in a it's an interesting moment now, because we know that there are some upcoming regulations that will impact definitely also data sharing and secondary use of health data, both for primary reasons and also for research purposes. And of course, it's I think that the idea is that hopefully these new regulatory frameworks will address some of the existing lack of clarifications, which is caused by the GDPR. But of course, we have to wait to see, definitely, for example, for the European health data space. So what are those specific regulations? One is the Data Governance Act, which we know that the proposal is being already published and is being voted. So it's really on the final stages now. And it also has provisions that are important for us for the data sharing, because Data Governance Act also introduces new concepts like data altruism consent, which is considered can be used when data is collected and being shared for the purpose of general interest, and also introduces let's say, role of the new entities like data cooperatives. So the idea is that these new data intermediaries should also be able to help individuals in exercising their rights when it comes to data sharing. I think this is immediately has already raised some questions about how this new regulation will interplay with the existing, of course, data protection regulations, specifically with the GDPR, and because this regulation is also proposing new model of consent, which is considered data altruism consent. It's very important to see that how this will add, or let's say, to the existing layers of the consent that we are dealing with, that when it comes to processing health data for research purposes. And of course, the terminology that's being used under the regulation, it's slightly different. So it uses the purpose of general interest, which we used to indeed for the concept of public interest under the GDPR. So that would be indeed interesting to see that if they can be also used interchangeably or not. And then finally, we are also waiting the legislative proposal for the European health data space. This will be very soon out. I think that it's a matter of days or weeks. And the idea is that, European health data space aims to provide a framework and also, let's say, a system of data governance specific for health data. So it will be one of the very first sectorial regulations in this regard. There has been already a number of important studies that's been conducted in preparation for for building European health data space, which has been very insightful because they have also showed the fragmentations across the member states, including the report on the assessments of the member states' rules regarding processing health data. I think this is also it's easily accessible, it's online. And also a number of other initiatives, including some e-consultations, are now in process as well, which is being initiated by the Joint Action for European Health Data Space, which are also, I think that they are very important, because they are also trying to give more voice to the individuals and to see that what are their preferences and so on when it comes to the data sharing. But yeah, I think that while we are waiting to see that how the regulation looks like, we expect that it will have, I think, the difficult task ahead to navigate this regulatory framework that we already have, and it's progress to regulate data sharing in health for the purpose of biomedical research, and also for the primary reasons. I think that's all from my side. Thanks a lot also for having me. I'm sorry that I cannot stay till end of the meeting, so thanks.
Thank you very much for a really insightful presentation. I just have one question, because you mentioned something that caught my attention. You mentioned that the investment in developing data sharing infrastructure has increased. Based on your observations and the studies that you did, are these investments more on the side of the private sector, or you also observe activities from the side of the government, public sector? Because according to my opinion, it's also a matter of competitive advantage.
Yeah, I think that I might be a little bit, my information may be a little bit biased, because I'm also involved in many university-based research projects that they are, of course, funded, most of them by the European Commission, that they are building this infrastructure. But there are also equally important other projects that, for example, IMI funded projects that they have different partners from pharma and from commercial companies as well. And I think that maybe it's fair to say that we have a mix of them, and of course a lot of partnerships and collaborations as well between the commercial and public entities.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? If they're not such, we move on with our next presentation, which will be carried out by Mr. Konstantinos Bromis. Konstantinos, would you like me to keep sharing your presentation?
Yep. Hi, I'm Konstantinos. I would like to thank you for the invitation. I'm currently a postdoc researcher at the Institute of Communication and Computer Systems of the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering in Athens. And my lab is currently collaborating for the Smart Birth project, which is a big data platform to offer evidence-based personalized support for healthy and independent living at home. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. Yes. So below I'm going to talk for the expected benefits of sharing data in the field of open platforms and digital technology for active and healthy aging. So the benefit for the providers of open platforms is the extended operational capacity. For developers of solutions for active and healthy aging, there is the optimized resources management. There is the benefit of insights on device usage, as well as the real-life user feedback using multiple devices for health monitoring. For the care or healthcare organizations, they have the opportunity for complex analytics on large pools of data, as well as the opportunity to apply advanced machine learning analytics. And for the end users, such as older persons or patients, there is the improved service delivery in terms of efficiency and precision, and also the personalized interventions. So by gathering real-time data and metrics from patients, we have the opportunity to apply interventions at the individual level. And for the policymakers, there is the enhanced evidence-based approach on decision making. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. The main challenges related to data regulation that providers and developers of open platforms encounter are the common understanding of the standardization efforts, the adoption of a common framework of standards, such as the SNOMED, the LOINC, and the ICD, and providers of data and device manufacturer to adopt domain standards, such as the HL7 FIRE, in order to enable interoperability with open platforms. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. The practices that have been proven to be effective in implementing data sharing within the current regulatory framework with other institutions are, first of all, the data sharing agreements with the providers, that they should be established since the beginning of the project, and also the data standardization using the widely accepted ontologies that I talked before, the SNOMED, CD, the LOINC, and ICD. And there is an example here. So the clinicians are sending the information and the parameters needed for monitoring, such as information regarding balance or hearing loss or cardiovascular diseases. And then we search through those widely accepted ontologies that I mentioned here in order to establish a common language between different actors of the platform. Yes, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. And finally, regarding the organizational and technological capacities, the providers of open platforms and developers of technology for active and healthy aging should follow closely the standardization initiatives of data sharing protocols. They should try to adopt interoperable data exchange protocols, and also they should try to extend existing ontologies in order to cover data handling that are not covered by the existing ontologies. And we have done the latter one. We have extended the FHIR database in order to handle data such as non-standardized questionnaires, or to consume data from two other projects that we are working, the HoloBalance and the Smart for Health, that are not covered by the existing ontologies. Yeah, that was it from me. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos, for a really nice presentation. Are there any questions from the audience for Konstantinos? Konstantinos, I have one question regarding Smart Bear platform. Of course, it depends on the phase of implementation, but do you have any plans regarding the commercialization of the platform? Are you planning to offer the platform services for commercial partners?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question.
Regarding Smart Bear platform, it of course depends on the phase of its implementation or development. Are you planning to commercialize the platform services or after the end of the project?
This is an interesting question, but I'm afraid I'm not able to answer this. I think my colleague knows a lot more about this. So if you want, you can you can send an email, and they will be really happy to answer this. But I think they are the more appropriate like people to answer this question.
Hi, Alexander. I'm George from ETC. We are also partners in this project.
Hello,
Konstantinos, he's coming from an academic institution which is not so involved in the commercial, let's say, exploitation of the platform. Nevertheless, yes, it is in our intention to continue with the exploitation of the outcomes of this concrete project. It is a huge project, and there are quite a lot of partners. It's a lighthouse project, as it is the term for this concrete type of projects. And so there are a lot of technical partners involved and a lot of technologies involved. The idea of this project is to somehow examine off-shelf, but also research outcomes as technological outcomes in a huge pilot. I mean, the pilot will take place in this project will involve 5,000 users all over the Europe. So it will be a big testing, a big testbed in 6 countries, and that's why also personal data is very important for this project, taking into account that we are dealing with 5,000 elderly people that are involved in the testing of the project. If you want to ask me more information about the Smart Bear project, feel free to communicate with me. and I will let you know whatever you like.
Definitely, George. I'll get in touch with you after the webinar regarding the exploitation of our KPIs, because I think that's there will be perfectly suitable to your business plans. Thank you. Thank you, George. All right. If there are no other questions from the audience, we move forward with the next interesting presentation, which will be carried out by Catherine Hornacki from HL7 Europe. Catherine, would you like me to share your presentation?
Yes, I would like to share my presentation. Thank you very much for the invitation. And
you're welcome.
I will try to give you an overview of different activities that we have been doing in HL7 Europe, which I think could be of interest to the questions, the very pertinent questions that you have put forward. So let me see my presentation.
Stop sharing.
Here. Yeah, I think this is the one. Wait. Let me find it. Okay. So let me project. And no. This is not. Wait for a second. Okay, let's see here. Share screen. Sharing. Then here. So a little bit about the HL7 and HL7 Europe. The HL7 vision is a world where everyone can securely access and use the right health data when and where they need it. And this is a vision that has been there for a long time, and I think it's very much relating to the topic of our discussion today about sharing data and how platforms can overcome the challenges they face. HL7 was formed in 1986 with the objective to share data from the laboratories and reduce cost. Then we had the HL7 Europe being formed after more than 20 national entities, affiliates of HL7 had been formed in Europe to aggregate the requirements at the European level. And that was in 2010. So last year we had the 10th anniversary. From the standards, many of you may know HL7 version 2 because it has been around for more than 30 years now. But there is also the clinical document architecture, which is a standardized way to display clinical documents based on HTML standards and XML. And then more recently, already 10 years old, the HL7 FHIR standard, faster healthcare interoperability resources, which will be mostly what I will be talking about today. HL7 FHIR is about REST APIs, and it brings a much bigger modeling effort, which is scaring people away from HL7, was called V3, into little chunks that essentially encompass all this knowledge that has been there. HL7 Europe has been around, as I said, since 2010, and we have been involved in a number of European funded projects. You see some of these here. We are having an HL7 in Europe newsletter annually. We have a website, and we are involved in European policy, like the Health Stakeholders Group, the ENISA expert group, and we also forge relationships with the academia through our engagement with EFMI, and also with the industry through our engagement with HIMSS and the Digital Health Society. And we have relationships also with WHO on an individual expert level. So let me start with the first question that you posed. What are the main challenges related to data regulation that providers of open platforms and developers for technology for active and healthy aging encounter in sharing data? I think the main challenge is how to implement effectively GDPR, how to have the standards that would allow you to create economies of scale. And I will throw my example from the European health data space, which essentially gives two different groups of use cases. We already heard that. The one is for primary data, My Health, and the other one is for secondary data, MyHealth.eu. And it's clear in the TEDA's joint action that we need to address governance for data exchange. We need to address infrastructure and technology. We need to address standards, data quality, semantic and technical interoperability. And HL7 Europe has been trying to serve as the glue to facilitate communication and collaboration in the different areas. And the REST APIs that HL7 Fire provides is a very good ingredient for this effort. But let me share with you a particular example. This example is from the Gatekeeper project. Many of you know it's similar to the Smart Bear project that we had just now. Its vision is to build a trust and secure platform to foster large-scale deployment of integrated digital solutions for early detection, and intervention in different regions around Europe and worldwide. There is also Singapore and Hong Kong involved, enabling novel business models. It's based on Fire and the Web of Things. And there are 7 basic use cases that are involved here. So this is how it looks like, the platform. And you see that there is a specific element that has to do with APIs, and that is based on HL7 Fire. We have developed, in fact, an HL7 Fire implementation guide, which essentially looks at these interfaces. The basic work is with the integration agent here, you see here, and also here, where you federate the data from different electronic health record and personal health record services. The Gatekeeper is a project is quite big. It has research institutions, ecosystem of standardization with W3C and HL7, healthcare providers, and a lot of industries, starting with Samsung, Medtronic, and also a lot of SMEs. And there is also a platform provider. So there is a lot of concern about storage and how we can actually bring that to Europe. But essentially, this is on a service provision model. It's a big challenge to how to make the ecosystem function well by sharing experience, by sharing procedures and processes, because in many ways the processes are still national. And even at the national level, what happens in one case may not apply to the other case. So big challenge this is. What we do offer, however, is a scalable way to do the integration. So we have devices that are connecting to HL7 Fire observations, and we have an implementation guide that explains how these observations are put together. So I think this is a clearly important resource in that sense. So this is the example of the Gatekeeper project is still running, and HL7 Europe has been functioning both as a standards body that helps create this implementation guide, but also as a mentor in a number of open calls where we are called to see how these new technologies are integrated. Now, the second question you had is what practices have proven to be effective in implementing data sharing within the current regulatory frameworks? And here our experience is rather limited, but again, it's colored by standardization. Our major contribution and experience here has been with the International Patient Summary and the Electronic Health Record Exchange format. In 2019, the Commission released this recommendation, which essentially said that we should standardize lab observations and results, diagnostic imaging, observations, essentially images, and the results, hospital discharge reports, and patient summaries for rare diseases. this would come in addition to what was already standardized via guidelines for prescription dispensation and general patient summaries under My Health at the EU. I think this is extremely important when we look at data sharing, because these are creating components that can be reused, and essentially by iteratively using them, we actually improve quality. You see at the bottom several projects that are actually working with the Crossing Health project, which is creating currently these specifications. It will be running until I think later this year and produce the specifications, but it is connected to My Health at EU and to TEDS very closely. And we make sure as HL7 Europe that it is also connected to other projects like the mHealth Hub, the Gatekeeper, the mHealth Hub just finished, by the way, and also the Survivorship Passport. You see here again what the aims of this project are: to have studies for the use of novel technologies like AI that are based on these formats, to have common models and standards and assets that can be reused by other projects, and share experience on what works and what doesn't. So essentially, there are three areas where they are contributing, and I think they are setting the stage for best practices. The first one is standardization and harmonization and digital inclusion. The second one is the ability to furnish citizens and health professionals with the required skills to choose the right applications, and also to provide the right requirements for the applications to improve. And last but not least, the actual data, which is critical for sharing. In Crossing Health, we are using Art Decor as the environment, and all the templates and specifications are open, and we invite actually the communities to contribute. In terms of innovation, the project has created a community space, and the ambition here is to serve as a connector among different communities. So we would definitely invite the Smart Bear, for instance, community of practice, to join and share their experience. The second is a list of products and services that are supporting the electronic health record exchange format specifications. And here we are also developing a pledge that different projects may or companies may add to their webpage, indicating their support. There is, in fact, especially with the international patient summary community of practice that is developing, and there are a lot of important elements that are brought to the table by such standards that look at the data. I think the quality assurance is paramount, because this is important, sharing whatever information you want to share, especially when you are trying to push the envelope towards real world data that would contribute to better applications, and real world evidence that would contribute to better policy. For us, these components and these standards at different levels are giving us the opportunity to test different applications, from tracking hypertension to rare disease passport to vaccination card. And these activities are done both at the national, regional, and international level. A completely different approach is indicated by the recently concluded Fair for Health project. And here we are not talking about data sets that are shared in a platform, for instance, but we are talking about hospitals that are certified health research performing organizations. And these hospitals or healthcare facilities have their own infrastructure of data, and they are protecting their data. And they are not giving access to their data direct, but they are answering questions about their data. Yeah, so essentially you have a federated model. Again, HL7 FHIR is the backbone, and you are able to ask the same question into multiple senders and then combine the result. We are actually creating what is called a FAIR verification agent, which is running in the platform of each hospital or facility, but it is exposing an interface that would allow you to run different models, algorithms, and also select where this algorithm will go. There is an open common model, and that's how we can actually even publish metadata of data sets that the researchers do not have access to direct, but they can use them in their research. So we are looking now at the project, a working group item at CEN, which will examine these ideas of certifying health research performing organizations in this model. And of course, the platform that runs in each of these centers may be different, but the important thing is that it gives the capability to run AI algorithms in a distributed way. We have presented this approach of data staying local also to TEDx, and it is quite well received for secondary use of data. So what are the expected benefits? I think there are benefits for everyone to have data sharing, but we need to be careful about it. And the most important thing is to learn how to work with data. I sometimes mention what is called data literacy. And this slide is directly from Crossy Health. The other thing that is important is that also the standardization world changes. And you see here how we envision different components that can serve as part of an API, an application programming interface for a device, but they can be combined to create things like a passport. Here we use the patient summary as a filter to understand better health information from medications. This is an IMI project. So, and let me finish with the last question that you had, which I thought was the most important one. Maybe we should pay you for this question. That is the question whether technological capacities would a platform owner or operator have. And of course, I would say HL7 Fire, but it's not simple as that. The first thing I would like to say is something that we advocated in a number of previous policy actions as HL7, that we need to be able to co-create with the users. We need to have flexible governance, and we need to align different initiatives because the power lays in collaboration. So what does it mean? It means that all the actors need to come together and speak the same language. It doesn't have to be the language of the SDOs or the language of the policymaker. They need to understand where their joint interests lay. And then you need products. You need products and data to test. And here you have validators, you have clinical guidelines, you have functional models, logical models. And sometimes we are pushed back, especially I'm pushed back from biological models. But in fact, this is in plain, pure language, what this thing is sharing. Are you sharing lab results? Are you sharing image data? What is it? You need a logical model there. So in a nutshell, capacity building is a key word, and you need organizational capabilities. You need to be able to speak regulations, policy, security, privacy. You need also synthetic data and workflows that will help you experiment. And of course, technical capabilities are probably the easiest thing to accomplish by knowledge of standards, the capability to create an implementation guide. And this is something that HL7 Europe is instrumental in helping other people develop and test in Fire Connectathons. HL7 International has a number of accelerator programs with different topics. We recently created one on medication leaflets. We created one for FAIR data, for research data that are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And this is actually ongoing after the FAIR for Health project ended. And the other thing that we advocate, and we are testing in a number of activities now, is standards that are connected to an agile process of development. HL7 International is having Fire Connectathons 3 times a year. This is not quite what IEEE Connectathons look like, which are more oriented towards products and marketing. This is about testing the implementation, testing the APIs to see how they work and validate them and mature them. Yeah. So this is an activity we are very much engaged now to make specifications that are mature from creation mode. And actually we are even now launching on the 31st. I should have put the logo here on the 31st of March, the Hospitals on Fire initiative, which is about how we can mature hospitals and their providers and their companies that are having an SLA with them to manage their own platforms, their own data platforms, and offer services to the public, to the patients, and to the regulators, yeah, or the policymakers. And with that, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of the things we are doing at HL7 Europe. And I would be happy to answer any questions if the time allows.
Thank you, Catherine, for the really informative and really nice presentation. I took a look at the chat, and there is one question from Elizabeth from the 50+ network, I think from Greece. Elizabeth, would you like to ask your question to Catherine? Would you like me to?
I do hear an enormous amount about co-creation, and I actually see very little of it. And I do quite a bit of evaluation, so I'm not talking just from a Greek perspective. And it is extremely difficult for people who are good at technology to actually cooperate with people who are going to be users. And yet the major users, particularly in health and well-being, are actually older people. And I don't know, there is a sort of barrier there, and I know you may have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, it is a huge barrier. It is very hard. And actually, I was thinking, I had a meeting earlier this morning, and I was thinking of myself as a translator sometimes, translating the needs in order to facilitate co-creation. Let me also give you an example on how we actually make this happen. In a project that we have, which is called Gravitate Health, we are looking at the leaflets. You may look it up. I mentioned it briefly. We are looking at the medication leaflets, the things that are in the box of a medication. Let me, like this one, the leaflets, and we are looking at literacy by older people. So what we did is we actually the concept of an ambassador, yeah. And the ambassador is the one that actually tells us what the problems are. And we are looking into these rounds of implementation in the connectathons on how we can implement little things. So for example, in the recent January connectathon, we took this leaflet or this electronic form as created by the European Medicines Agency, and we actually colored parts of it, yeah? So we worked with our ambassadors, and we said, this is the part that is relevant for you because this is the age that you are. And then I think at a later stage, we will be also taking things like font size and alerts and all that in a concept that from a technical perspective, from technical people on the team, on the group, on this audience is a minimum viable product. Through different agile iterations. So we have 3 iterations a year in this European funded project that goes through the HL7 Fire Connectathon. And the important element is that we are quite open for our problems. We don't feel that we need to have a complete product. We let other people participate there because the intent is to essentially serve the needs of the users and have these cycles of co-creation, governance, and alignment. I hope I answered the question. It's not easy. It's not easy, but we do try to make it happen.
At least we cannot hear you.
Sorry, my apologies. It's not just towards older people, it's to most people. The most pamphlets about operation, about covering their ass in case anything goes wrong, and it's all there. Whereas what we really need to do is get the main points I mean, I have to say, Apple does that normally. It gives you, or some other companies do too. They give you the main operating main points. And then if you really want to go more, they send you to somewhere else to look it up. And this is what's needed in large print. An enormous number of people can't read very small print. And I could show you some stuff that I've been collecting in it. It's a sort of nightmare. And I just say, this is not just about older people. This is really for the normal user. Anybody who wears glasses will tell you the same. It's just not viable. So it's all these different dimensions that have to be looked at. And what we want to say is covering your ass is one thing. Actually helping people to understand is something else, and to feel that they can find out more when they need it.
Elizabeth, this is great, and let me give you all also, and I think we should do a meeting in Greece on that topic, maybe, and I'll keep in mind to contact you later on that for the congress, that upcoming doctors congress. But let me give you one example that we have been talking with some. With also the EMA, and it has to do with the topic of platforms that we are discussing here. So right now, if you want to get an authorization for a medication product in the market, what they do is they test it only in English.
I know.
So they take about 10 or 20 or 30 people. That's the process of the marketing authorization. And they test and they say, do you understand what it says? Do you understand the risks? Do you understand how you will use this medication product? And so on. And they have a big plate with all the information that is in the leaflet that I showed you. What we are trying with the electronic formats to promote is a situation where we are actually in real life anonymized, collect the data about the understanding of this information, so that people or organization like your 55 plus organization can participate, and they can say, yes, I understand this medication instructions. No, I don't understand this. This is too small. This is not presented right, and so on. But this is more in the area of vision and in the area of active creation of evidence, real world evidence. I hope I didn't abuse the time you were given to me. Back to you, Alexander.
Thank you very much for the really nice comments, and also always straight to the point. Thank you very much. There is one question in the chat option coming from Georgia Chitis from the Smart Bear platform. It's a bit more technical. Do you have any tools for legacy systems?
Legacy systems, yeah. Usually we all know that, all of us that are technical know that there are adapters. And adapters, like very much the pluggable adapters, are also valid in the FHIR world. These adapters usually involve the translation of coding systems and the translation of structures. Unfortunately, so far they are mostly customized on a project by project basis. One instance that I didn't describe here, but it is a project, actually, it's a health systems project, the first that we are involved in is HL7. We are creating an automatic extraction of data from the electronic health record to create what is called the survivorship passport, like a patient summary for childhood cancer survivors. And there the idea is to collect data from all different systems in the hospital to populate the patient summary. And we create FHIR interfaces. And the idea is that you have a common interface, but then the implementation in the different hospitals. There are 6 hospitals in Germany, Belgium, Lithuania, Spain, and Italy. I don't know, and Austria. Those will be special. But the idea is that we will develop a model for how much the cost would be for this common interface. I hope I answered your question. Again, these tools are not publicly available, but it would be nice if we had a repository with such adapters that are open source.
All right, thank you, Catherine, for the really informative answer. So let's move with other presentation since we're running a bit out of time.
Let me answer my screen.
Thank you. Let me just share from my side.
Alexander, hello. Is it possible I can share from my side?
Yes, of course. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I just made some minor edits since the what I sent you yesterday.
No problem. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, absolutely. Just tell me if you can. Let me just say, share.
Perfect. It's loading.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. For me, it's still morning, but I am Maria Palambini, and I lead the healthcare and life sciences practice here.
Maria, I'm sorry for interrupting. Could you please just enlarge the presentation?
Sure, sorry. Play from...
sorry for interrupting you.
No worries, no worries. So I lead the healthcare and life sciences practice here at the IEEE Standards Association. For those of you, the IEEE stands for the Institute of Electronic and Electrical Engineers. And we live by a very core mission, which is to advance technology for the benefit of humanity. So we are a global organization. We've been around for more than 100 years. We're in 160 countries. We actually have an office based in Vienna as well. We have offices in Bangalore, obviously the United States, and then naturally chapters and technical councils around the world. So as I mentioned, our mission, it's really important because every aspect of what we do here at the IEEE, whether it's from technical activities to the development of standards, to just papers and information, always keeps this core mission in mind. And this is across every industry domain. And it's really, really important. And it's something that we follow quite importantly. So, the work we do here in the Standards Association, we do many different ways, many paths to standards. We have the Industry Connections Program, which is the incubator program. And that's quite a bit of the work we do in the healthcare life sciences side, which is to really incubate ideas and pilots and projects that hopefully will graduate into standards. And then we do natural standardization, we do conformity assessment projects, and we have our newest arm, which is also the open source platform, which allows us to do the open data commons, but just also nurture open source projects and standards as we see the growth of this interest from the market. So what is our mission here at the Healthcare Life Sciences practice? We improve the global standard quality of life through every step for affordable healthcare and access to medicine. We support innovation to improve overall wellness and obviously improve societal outcomes. And we focus on 3 areas of the healthcare life science value chain: pharma biotech, clinical health, and global wellness. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of a different, hopefully something to think about in the world of what we're seeing beyond just aging, but in the world of personalized health and how we could take it back into naturally this fast-growing population of the aging. So we all know, and it's been very well documented, this is the fastest growing population sector across the globe. I mean, Europe, Africa, Asia, United States, we see this growing quite significantly. But we want to really focus on what does that mean? And when we talk about aging, we also talk about patients. We think of the typical person, a typical person of age. We think of a typical patient. And this is exactly not the case, right? When we think about how we're going to support the aging and their health, we want to make sure that we don't think about them in those lenses. We also have to think about, it's just not about, physical wellness. We have to think about the mental wellness. And we also have to think about long-term needs. So we think obviously the physical health care, but we also have to make sure that we preserve the rights of the aging, their dignity, their fundamental freedoms. So by dignity, automatically we think that if we have to take care of the aging, we have to take away their independence. And obviously that's significant, right? Someone who's managed their whole life and then comes a point at a certain age, say, oh, sorry, we're going to take this on, and we take agency of your life because we're your caregiver. And these are sort of the things that we want to look at and say, how can we change them through the use of technology and tools? So obviously, this is just real quick to just really show the point. If we look at, this is obviously courtesy of Eurostat. It's available for free. It's open commons. But naturally, if we just look at the 85 and year old plus, look how large we expect that population growth by the year of 2050. And that's merely being driven by women, right? So we're expecting women to get a lot older, right? And then we actually see the population sets of what we call the generation between 20 and 50-year-olds not to grow as fast. So that's telling us a very important thing. In our traditional mind, we think of taking care of the aging as a family caregiver, right? Generations of families always took care of their parents, their grandparents, and so on. But we don't have that luxury anymore. That's a changing dynamic. So the question is how are we going to care for aging? And we can't just think of the aging as people who are physically or in some other debilitative process. They are aging healthy, who still need access to tools to maintain their independence. So what we're seeing is this proliferation of an age tech market. And for all that it's great, presents a lot of challenges, which we're going to get into. And so just an example is we've seen the growing use of virtual tools, whether it's Google Home, Alexa, Apple Home, being utilized by the aging for like simple memory things, like remind me to take my medicine, or remind me to lock the door at night, or to enable this, or whatever it might be. Those tools were not necessarily designed to support the aging, right? When you think of all the adverts and commercials going on to sell these tools, it's always like, Alexa, turn my light on when I get home, or do this for me, lock the door before I leave. It was never. And now we're seeing this growing use case, right? Just automatically happening by this growing class of aging population. So where do we see the uses and the tools? And this is really important because we want tools and technology that can naturally serve the use cases, right? Companionship, personal safety, medical support, but in such a way that preserves human dignity, gives us the power to consent or not consent the use of our data, and ethical management of that data, right? And how it's being used and who's seeing it and that kind of thing. So we know what the use cases are, and we see there's tools. This is just an example in supporting. But let's just remember that while they're supporting, they're generating data about these individuals, right? Every sensor, every camera, every use, every robotic, every virtual headset is not only delivering some sort of service, but it's collecting information about them. And the question is what is being done with this data? And then when we think about the technology sets, so naturally, when we think about data decision-making, we're seeing this proliferation of AI at the edge, right? Which is great, but also challenging, right? And there comes a lot of questions about the biases in the training algorithms and how the data is being used, and is it doing it correctly, and we validating it. And then we think about the data sharing. And the question is we're seeing the growth of federated machine learning and swarm AI. This is an awesome opportunity for this concept of open data sharing, but again, comes with a lot of challenges. So the question of data sharing, and I'm focusing more on data sharing rather than data regulation, because data regulation, I think, is very, very important, protecting the privacy and rights of patients. So when we think of GDPR, we think about naturally protecting the privacy of all individuals. And even in the US, we have HIPAA, which is the Health Information Portability Accountability Act. But HIPAA in the United States has been more focused on protecting the privacy, and has really sort of quashed the idea of portability of data, which is the data sharing aspect. And so the question here is how do we develop a way that we can protect the rights of patients, but use the data to actually make patient outcomes better? In this case, how do we develop tools and technologies that can use the data and share it in such a way that actually protects the dignity of the aging, but also gives them tools that are designed for them, right? This is where we get to a point, and we're going to get to this really closely, personalized or patient-centered tools for the aging. So, where do we get data? We have data from multiple tools, right? So if you think about smart city initiatives, there's data being collected and analyzed in every aspect of the individual's experience in a city, right? From power and energy to transport to, risk assessments, that kind of thing. And then you have your wearables that are just generating data about you all day long. And then, so why? We want to realize the potential of this patient-centered and personalized assistance, right? And I think that we can't think of one old patient represents all. We have to also think about, in the same way, is what is needed for the patient. Looking at human factor design is really, really important as well, right? So these are sort of what we use this data for. And then naturally, allowing these tools and algorithms to better anticipate risk and issues at the home and the immediate surrounding, right? And this is where the collection of data being used in such a way can actually support that. And naturally, we want to avoid bias in the data collection, because that's just going to proliferate another problem. And then the who is like researchers and for development of technologies and tools, right? So we want the data to be shareable and usable so that it can give the insights to develop these things, right? And we also want to be able to use it in such a way that helps caregivers and clinical staff, right, to do what they need to do. And finally is like, how do we balance this core tension between the open data sharing and sharing of open insights with the right to protect the privacy and the dignity of the patient? So these are all the things that we're thinking about in striving to make the best tools. So when I talk about patient-centered and personalized, we're really talking about these technology design considerations, right? What is going to work for an aging population? Again, not one patient is typical. Not one aging person is typical. You have those who are independent and healthy and just need certain level of tools. And then you have others who actually need care or might have medical conditions and that kind of thing. So when we often think about aging data, and we see it in a medical sense, right? There's many studies for Alzheimer's disease, especially at the National Institute of Health Aging Center, or Parkinson's disease. There's like these diseases that have been really designed to relegate to the aging population. But we need to take it down to just all individuals who are aging. And even if you had to set a standard, who says it's 55 and over, who says it's 60 and over, 65 and over, it's really looking at all these demographics from both age, from socio, from environmental, from geographic, from language. It's looking at all these different things. And so the question is how do we start looking at all these design considerations from, security, privacy, scalability, adaptability? This all requires data, right? This is not something someone's going to wake up and say, hey, I just have the right tool for everybody. How are we going to use the data to get to a point that we design for patient-centered and personalized for this aging population? So I just want to give you all an example of data sharing versus data privacy. And I can't actually cite the study because I'm under NDA, but that an example was, I was talking to a clinical researcher who's doing a precision oncology research using AI for their study. They're going to be publishing the study in a few months. And the question was to the researcher was, they were using anonymized data for this oncology research, right? And so we asked them, are you using anonymized data? And she said, no. And I said, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, the data, because you have to protect the privacy of the patient. So they're saying we're using double coded data to protect the patient. And I said, why? And then and then she was like, well, because if we see something in their DNA and all the testing and all the data, we find that they have some other comorbidity or some other disease that was not brought to their attention, we can notify the doctor. And their doctor, their clinician, or their investigator. And I said, okay, that's really great. I go, but why wouldn't you just notify the patient? And they're like, because the patient doesn't know we have their data. And so this is where we get into the question of privacy, right? And consent. Because had the patient been aware that their data was being used for research, right, and they had consented to it, the patient could have been notified. Like, who is more motivated than a patient to take care of their own health? So there's just questions like, how do we get to a point that we allow researchers to use the data they need to use while protecting the dignity of all patients, and in this case, especially the aging, and make them understanding of that so that we can actually be all aware of what's going on. And so this was just a perfect use case, not that they did anything wrong, but it just brought up so many questions. And these are the questions that all of us, regardless of age, should be asking. So I want to share with you a little bit about some of the work we do here to touch to these technologies and topics, right? IEEE SA publishes, I think they have, I want to say over 1,000 standards published and over 3,000 working groups currently in progress across every domain and every technical discipline. When we think about tools and technologies for the aging, we think about sensors, right? We think about the hardware, the software, we think about the storage, we talk about ethics of data governance. We have standards working groups across all these technical disciplines. Smart cities, right? The idea of taking data to assess and develop these tools for risks and falls. But specifically, I had mentioned, federated machine learning and swarm AI. And just for, swarm AI, for those who may not be familiar, swarm AI is the idea of swarming insights. It's open sharing of insights, not necessarily just data. And it's decentralized, especially for precision clinical research. It's basically going into all these facilities around the world and taking their insights and using them for some sort of precision research while protecting the privacy of the patient. Why that's really interesting but challenging at the same time is that in order for Swarm AI to be completely effective, you're going beyond your geographic boundary, right? You're especially in a targeted research case. And where does that become a problem?
Guck mal, die spricht auch schön Namen gehabt.
So where does that become a problem is regulation, right? Because regulations on privacy are not harmonized across geographic borders. So this can become a little bit of a challenge, right? When you're trying to use this data in this way, which becomes a barrier, right? We need 50,000 sites of insights for one particular lung oncology case or whatever the study might be. And so this is where standards can really try to support like the data governance, the ethics of using the technologies, protecting the privacy of the patient, and that kind of thing to sort of mitigate those barriers in such a way that we can actually achieve what the intended goal was. These are particularly standards that we are doing in, as an example, the architecture for federated machine learning, which every single standard of the first three includes an element of privacy and security. And it's at the forefront. They also talk about, interoperability, data exchange, and that kind of thing, but it's at the forefront of what they're doing. And then we have, for instance, a standard for biometric privacy, which is also very, very important when we're talking about immutable aspects of the human body. So that's for an example. And these are ideas where we could say, look, these may be very horizontal in discipline, but how do we take them and refine them and put them into our use case as we do in healthcare and life science, whether it be for clinical trials, pharmaceutical supply chain, and that kind of thing. And then we have this this open source standard on open mobile health data, which is taking data from wearables, right? And put it in metadata standard format for open sharing to be used actually for clinical research. So in this case, we have approval from the FDA to accept the data that's you following the standard from a wearable for a clinical research means. And this is really, really important because this is actually, everything's a wearable now. And this actual schema is being used across multiple disease therapeutic states, like 1752.2 is now on cardiovascular activity. And then the subsequent one will be on the next therapeutic phase. So we're basically building a generation of standards just based off an initial schema, and then go putting them according to use case. And this is really starting to solve a little bit of the question of we're seeing around interoperability and using data beyond just monitoring. Like we want to get beyond monitoring with this data and use it for clinical research and put it back into obviously R&D. And then IEEE 11073, which is a family of standards. It's health informatics, medical and health device communication standards. We actually have it referenced in the US FDA's CDRH policies. There's over, I want to say like 20 or 30 standards in that family, all dealing with the nomenclatures, the communication of wellness and medical devices. I mean, this is just a small subset of areas we're trying to think about and how we can bring into this growing aging population. Another thing that we get in where we're really incubating quite a bit right now is in this, we have these incubator programs, which are open. You actually don't even have to be a member of the IEEE or the Standards Association to participate. They're bringing everybody together to start thinking about where do we need standards or solutions or frameworks in all these different use cases. And one of the areas is currently in the telehealth paradigm. We're actually launching a whole activity on home care for the aging, which is really looking at these remote patient monitoring devices and support for the home, and looking at this personalized centered design, tech design area to start supporting standards or developing frameworks for potential standards in that space. So that's going to be ultimately a pilot program, a competition program. We actually just finished a competition on just general remote patient monitoring devices for patient-centered healthcare systems. And we're taking it to the aging as well, and also the use of robotics, telerobotics in that area. And then there's also a growing use case for the mental wellness side and the challenges around digital therapeutics for mental health care for the elderly. So overall, we think about, digital therapeutics for mental, you think about a mobile app, right? We think about a VR headset, virtual reality headset, all of these things, they're all great. but they're great for someone who understands them, right? So if I think about my parents never had a smartphone. They never used a computer. So all of these things to them would have been like completely foreign language. I could have been speaking, we're Italian, so I could have been speaking Greek to them. So it would have been not very helpful. But as a caregiver, I could have said, okay, I can help you. But again, there's always the idea that there's a human intermediary there to support their work. So the question is how do we not only develop these technologies in such a way that they're feasible, adaptable, accessible, but also the element of digital literacy. They need to understand not only how to use them, but the nuances about them, right? They need to be protected and have their right to dignity and the right to consent and all of these things. So there's a technical element and then there's a human factor element that has to go along with all of this work. And these are sort of the elements that we're addressing in these programs. And like I said, they're open, they're really more incubation because not necessarily everything we do becomes the standard, but may become another part of work. But it's this one, for instance, the data-driven technologies for mental health care is being driven predominantly out of the UK from the Alan Turing Institute. The Transforming Telehealth Paradigm has over 100 participants from over 25 countries participating. So you name the continent, they're there. These are all really important initiatives that people feel passionate about and that kind of thing. So, you know, we do a lot of outreach. The same way I'm talking with you all today, it's not just about the standards, it's just about the work that we want to bring attention to where it might resonate with somebody to come and talk about it with us. We talk to other people about it. We share insights and case studies, but ultimately the goal is to, you know, bring together the community to work together to solve the problems at hand. So I invite all of you to either, if you want to come speak on my podcast or my webinars or listen to them, please join me. We're actually doing a whole mini-series on robotics for home care for the aging in September and that kind of thing. And that's all I have for you today. I could have taken up 3 hours today, but I tried to keep it within 15 minutes for the purpose of this program.
Thank you very much, Maria, for the really informative presentation. We will definitely get in touch with you regarding the podcast. It sounds really interesting to us.
For sure. Yes, it's a great opportunity to bring awareness to all your different projects.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Maria before we move to our very last presentation today? I have one. You mentioned during your presentation that there is an incubator campaign. Does this campaign include also companies from Europe or organizations from Europe, or is it only limited for the United States?
Anywhere in the world. All of our incubators are open to any individual, like I said, anywhere in the world who wants to bring their expertise and obviously their time to participate in the project or to instantiate a project. They might find that they have an idea and want to instantiate it. So it's completely open.
Thank you. All right. If there are no other questions, please feel free to approach Maria via her email address. And now we move to our very last presentation. Share the screen again. Our next presentation will be carried out by Professor Itka Akota. Itka, would you like me to share your slides, or would you like to do
Hi, good afternoon. I'll try to share myself if that's possible.
Of course.
Let's try. Okay. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it. Can you please enlarge your presentation? Maybe just put the
I'm afraid
presentation
it's minimized. I can't make it bigger. So
in the down right corner, you can zoom it out. Would you like me to share
okay.
your slides?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can hear you. Would you like me to share your presentation? Can you hear us, Itzia?
Yes.
Would you like me to share your presentation? I can.
Yes, please.
I can check it. All right, I'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon again. I'm Itziar Alcorta, Civil Law Professor of the University of the Basque Country in Spain, and I'm also a participant at the Smart VR project that has been already presented. And my presentation will be complementary to the previous one by Dr. Shabani, yet more a little bit in depth to the problems that they are arising with the GDPR implementation through the EU member states. And let me also thank Ido Yolanda, who is doing her PhD with me at this project, for her slide on the comparison table I've asked her to prepare for you as an use case. So next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. To the cooperation is crucial for research. Thank you very much. We have already said that cooperation is crucial for research in previous presentations, yet a number of legal and operational issues need to be addressed to ensure that European healthcare systems can make best possible use of data for purposes of primary use, for direct patient care, and also for secondary use to drive health research and innovation. So it's clear for me that while the GDPR is a much appreciated piece of legislation, variation in application of the law and national level legislation have led to a fragmentation of the law, which makes cross-border cooperation for researchers quite difficult, actually. And furthermore, the interpretation of the law is complex for researchers and at national level. So whatever steps are chosen by the EU policymakers to address this issue, it is clear that cooperation along member states should be taken into account. And I would also say that the COVID-19 pandemic has clearly demonstrated that the need for such cooperation and provided many examples and new models that can bring rapid and responsive action that should be further developed in the future. Next slide, please. So why is this difference on the lawful legal basis among the member states? As you may know, the GDPR indicates that secondary use or further processing, as the law says, of data for research purposes is to be considered compatible with the purpose limitation principle. Yet, for processing health data, researchers must also ensure processing is carried out pursuant to one of the GDPR lawful justifications or basis. And the case is that under GDPR, there are a number of different options for research processing. Some of them must be implemented by EU or member state law, and other bases, such as consent, for instance, are available without the necessity of further law. So one of these bases is specific for scientific research, and it requires that member states or EU law provides for the processing of sensitive data for scientific research purposes in accordance with Article 89. This article holds that safeguards shall ensure technical and organizational measures in place to uphold the principle of data minimization, and goes on to highlight some measures which may be used to achieve this principle, such as pseudonymization or anonymization. Next slide, please. So a major source of uncertainty for researchers is choosing the appropriate legal basis for processing data and understanding what activities fall under the various articles that we saw in the previous slide. The different interpretations lead to considerable consequences for data subjects with more administrative burden. Also, some processing activities may fall under different legal bases simultaneously, and researchers have often based their processing activities on several legal bases. For example, processing data based on their necessity for the performance of a contract and in the same time seeking consent. However, This interpretation contradicts the opinion of the European Data Protection Board. Following the EDPB, one should adopt one single legal basis and certainly cannot jump from consent as a legal basis to another legal basis if it is found that the consent legal basis did not meet the criteria. Next slide, please. So here, for example, you have a sample of legislation that have been adopted by member states on health research. To find a legal basis, a researcher may need to navigate this intricate GDPR and sectoral law, and also may need to reach such laws alongside with authoritative guidance, which addresses use of data research. Next slide, please. Here you have a comparative table among 3 different models adopted by the EU member states, showing the divergence on the legal basis in place for health research. We don't have the time to further develop, but at the end of the presentation, Idoia could tell us something more about this table and use it as a case law for highlighting the differences among these implementations of the EU GDPR law. Next step, please. The European Data Protection Board advises also against the use of GDPR consent as a legal basis for processing for health data for research, primarily due to power imbalance, but also notes that informed consent is still required to fulfill obligations under the ethical consent for clinical trials and medical intervention. France, similarly, has made it clear that they require informed consent, but not the consent defined in the GDPR, rather as an ethical safeguard for the participation of individuals in research. Another example, Ireland, has applied a blanket requirement of explicit consent under the GDPR as a requirement for both primary and secondary research. And stakeholders report that due to this, they have had a burdensome requirement having considerable impact on the conduct of research. Particular problems have arisen in Ireland around the need to reconsent. Next slide, please. The difference between public and private research is also relevant because of the lawful basis might change. Where research is in the public interest, in addition to the specific basis for scientific research, certain categories of researchers may also be able to rely on substantive public interest. This will be very difficult for researchers in non-for-profit organizations who may find it challenging to prove that research is in the public interest. And also, this public interest legal basis can only be invoked where such processing is provided for in member state law. This will demand that the legislator defines which type of researchers may make use of this public interest criteria. And it will also demand that the legislator has weighed the risks to the individual against public benefits. So the point is that member states have not introduced legislation specifying which lawful basis should be utilized for processing in the basis of public interest. Next slide, please. Need of greater coherence and definition of terms and tools used to achieve this harmonization through Europe is also relevant. We have talked of anonymization in the previous presentation. Anonymization is considered by the GDPR a useful tool for risk containment. Yet, anonymization as such is still an act of data processing and must be legitimated itself under the GDPR. So clarification is needed under which conditions the further processing of data in order to render them anonymous for scientific purposes would be legitimate. Furthermore, clarification is needed on when data can really be considered anonymous. So this is the case that was posed in the previous presentation. In situations where data are used for the primary function of providing care, anonymization will still be very limited, since the patient must be re-identified in some cases. Pseudonymized data is therefore more commonly used in the healthcare setting because it can safeguard data while still allowing for identifying the patient if it is necessary. The point is that pseudonymization data falls within the remit of the GDPR. Its definition and the tools used to render data pseudonymized should be a common interpretation also across the EU. Closely related to safeguarding tools like anonymization and pseudonymization is the need for a common approach to security, including cybersecurity, to ensure that when data are shared, the safety of such sharing can be assured. This demands not only a common legal understanding of how terms such as security by design should be understood, but also closer collaboration between member states on technical aspects of security. ENISA, for example, could play a role here, and it might not be sufficiently known between stakeholders. Also, support for a minimum data set to facilitate health data exchange within member states is important. As you know, data are collected in different ways. So it is hard or even impossible to combine them in a usable way. And therefore, initiatives to come to a common understanding on what data should be collected would be a significant step forward. Such initiatives should be pursued at member states and at EU level to find agreement on core elements of data sets in order to facilitate better cooperative use of such data, and also for research and for patient care. Finally, it has also been raised in this webinar, the issue described above on semantic and technical interoperability. In order for data to be shared, whether for patient care or for research, the data must be shareable in a way that ensures their confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Next slide, please. A code of conduct at the EU level could be particularly helpful in creating common rules in situations of data sharing between member states. Noting that differences necessarily arise because the GDPR allows for divergence in the way member states implement their health legislation in the healthcare sector. However, a code of conduct should not exclude further EU measures such as sectoral acts to facilitate health data use in the public interest in the field of public health or scientific research. I think that the code of conduct could play a role in offering such clarification, but ideally, this clarification should come first from the European Data Protection Board, based on which a code of conduct could be developed to address some of the specific procedural issues in the use of health data for purposes purposes. Next slide, please. The GDPR itself foresees the potential EU-level legislation in the context of the legitimation of processing of health data, notably for processing in the public interest. Such legislation would also have to be compatible with national level sectoral law on the organization of health systems, including the capacity to address both public and private entities conducting research. As a final word, it is important to say that sound health data governance will be one of the pillars of trust that support the European health data space legal framework that has also been invoked in this presentation. But it can only be successful if it is truly supportive of the other pillars of trust, which demand assurance of data quality, transparency, and the full support to patients to act as active agents in their own health and care, with full capacity to exercise their health and data-related rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ita, for the really informative presentation. And now we're heading towards the end of our webinar. Thank you very much for your patience. A few words from our colleague and friend, Frederick.
Yes, thank you, Alexander, and thank you very much to all our speakers, panelists, and of course participants for these contributions. We had set up this webinar starting basically from comments and challenges that we heard ourselves from players in the field of open platforms for active and healthy aging, or platforms that allow to build and integrate product services applications for AHA and AAL products and services. And so together, we're very grateful also to the IDIH project for hosting this webinar together with us, and also for bringing in some of the speakers. And I think we've heard, quite a few interesting insights at various levels and from various backgrounds, and we saw a lot of different initiatives, services, organizations, projects being mentioned and referenced here, which will provide useful information for all of us and all of those involved in the development of open platforms for active and healthy aging, which in the end is definitely about bringing together data. All these platforms are collecting data, and then all the questions come up around data access, data sharing, data privacy. And one of the things we also heard today was, again, the need for collaboration, co-creation with all the actors involved, from the developers to the end users. So thank you once again to all of you. Please feel free to get in touch with each other if there are any further questions or comments, or if you need the contact details from one of the speakers or the participants, feel free to contact Alexander or myself, and we'll be happy to put you in touch. Just as a final word, we're already looking ahead at a next event, an online webinar, which we'll be organizing on April 5th. And this will be looking at some of the monitoring and self-evaluation tools that we have been developing within PlatformUptake.eu, and which indeed, provide an opportunity for platforms to self-assess their capabilities, their how they perform and how they position amongst other platforms based on KPIs that have been developed within the project and so on. So we'll be talking and presenting some of that. So we look forward to meeting all of you and many others there. And then at the end of April, on the 29th, we're having another matchmaking event. We already had an online matchmaking event in January, where we offer the opportunity to any and all companies and developers of platforms, but also of AAL and AHA solutions and applications and products, to make a short pitch presentation of what they are offering, as well as offering people from, let's say, the demand and the user side, from healthcare, social care organizations, to tell us about their challenges or things that they're looking for, or certain problems that they're looking to solve and for which they are looking for technological solutions. So all that will be brought together in that matchmaking webinar on April 29th, in which we're also, among others, collaborating with the AAL Austrian network. So make a note of that, and then we look forward to seeing you there. And with that, I think we can conclude this webinar. Again, here you find our contact details if you need to reach us. Thank you again to all of you, and we look forward to engaging with you in these upcoming events and other activities that we will be hosting and organizing.
Thank you.
Thanks
very
to
much.
all.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye. Everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Very informative. Very honored to be part of it.
Thank you, Katrine, for the nice words.